Hello, welcome back. This is Yana the Heretic, and my channel is The Unpopular Opinion, Becoming Popular. And we are going to be talking about Gate 53 today. It is the gate of new beginnings and development, and it first aired on July 6th to July 12th. And this is the last gate under Godhead Parvati. I want to begin first saying that this is a root gate in the sensing circuit. And what really was brought to me this past week, I was on a bike ride and I saw this plant, and I had recognized it before, but I forgot what it was called. And we'd been doing some herbalism hiking and pointing out, certain native plants, and we found the man root. It's this plant that has really tiny, thin spirals. And they look like vines or like ivy. And there's also this big spiky cucumber. It's considered the wild cucumber, and it's giant. It's like big balls that are sharp, and the flowers are actually shaped like stars. So they're tiny little white, yellowish stars, and there's just so many interesting components to this plant. When you break it open, my partner said that the seeds look like milk duds. And this is an extremely fertile plant. Like, if you look to fertility and resilience, this is the plant, and it's funny. It's funny to say that, bring this up. But when I started looking at, the facts for how little spirals are created in vines, it's the pressure and stress that is created in the environment that causes it to spiral. And the spiral itself you find in trees and limbs as well, and it's something touching it that creates it to bounce off. And it creates this spiral, but it also strengthens it like so much. You can't really push it over. If you think of something straight, it's more capable of being broken or pushed over, but a spiral is extremely resilient. It's actually called thigmotropism when something grows from stress and starts to spiral. And not only that, there's a lot of really interesting aspects to this plant. It typically grows in like wetland areas. It holds the ground itself together, but it also survives a drought. The seeds of the the wild cucumber, they are hard to germinate. You have to literally scar the seed because the coating of it is extremely tough to get through. And I couldn't find a better, representation of this gate than that. Because we have seeds in this quarter of civilization that we wish to sow that brings about a new form of who we are. Who do we choose to really become? And this is like really expanding. And we're coming to the end of the quarter, right? We only have another month left. What have we really found to be true about our form and what we wish to become in civilization? Maybe we haven't really made a huge stance, and we haven't really been fulfilled or satisfied with what we've responded to. So this is really bringing these new beginnings, this fertility or rebirth back into the cycles. whether it's you reminiscing on what this last cycle that ended really did for you. You know, did you get a new certification that will open doors for you? Did you start a new cycle? Did you pay for a new class, or started a new mentorship, or, you know, what's really coming through for you? Either the old and learning from the old and fermenting with this lesson, or are you beginning to start a new cycle? And it really depends on your authority whether or not it's the right cycle for you to begin. So our authority is mostly from either waiting to respond, if you're emotional, and getting asked a yes or no question if you're sacral. Don't be afraid to ask people to rephrase the question if you are unclear. And then the spleen acts instantaneously from the intuitive center. It's like the response comes from your intuition. So it's either a yes or a no right off the bat. Or do you need a voice, you know, what all of these plots are to somebody else in order to really figure it out? Do you need somebody to listen to you? So it is important to enter a cycle with clarity, because when it comes down to the 53, it's a root gate, and root gates are always modes of depression in a way, because it is creating stress. It is the fuel, the adrenaline center for stress. And you don't want to start something and other people have expectations that you are going to finish this cycle, because gate 53 doesn't really they tend to not care about that, or not so much that they don't care, but they're okay, and it's okay for them to not finish things. You know, they may start a book, they may leave their food uneaten, you know, they don't have to finish what they started. But the thing is, they will still get external pressure, you know, depending on what they enter into, because somebody can be over their shoulder and, you know, pushing them to finish something and being like, well, you're not smart enough and you're not focused enough, you know, to get this done, and therefore we're going to ask somebody else. Or, you know, you may not want to finish this yourself if you're a gate 53. So you're hoping that somebody else can take over, and they're open to doing that and finding the right person to do that. So me and my partner both have the harmonic, which is gate 42, and that creates the channel of maturing or maturation. And that's when it gets really challenging, because you don't want to start a new thing, because you automatically are going to need to finish it. Whatever it is, you're going to enter it, and you have this mechanic to see it through fully. And that could be, you know, years of work. So if you have the gate 42, you know, you're already automatically finishing something. You have this incentive to see it through fully, which makes it difficult to separate yourself from the cycle. And sometimes you can be extremely bored and trapped in it. You know, maybe you entered something that, you know, your parents thought that you should do because you're going to sustain the lineage, but realistically, like, you aren't interested in being, you know, a nurse or a doctor or a dentist, or, you know, whatever brings you money. Or, you know, these are just examples, right? So there's a lot of pressure, but you finish your degree and then you're like, you know what, sorry, like, I don't really resonate with this. And or it could be a cycle with a relationship that you have. You know, if you don't really learn the lesson in your previous relationship of what not to do, if you haven't gone through the alchemical process of calcination or dissolution and going up the stages, you don't really realize how your limbic system is creating these endless repetitive cycles for you, and it becomes extremely taxing on your soul. And you know, then you get ailments. And I've personally experienced this, you know, this brain fog or negativity that, you know, can put you back into the same loop. So how have you matured through this cycle? And how will you mature through the next cycle? That's why it's important, if you have gate 42, really understanding that. Otherwise, you can pick something up and fiddle with it and feel comfortable putting it down at the end of this transit, and that be okay. You know, you don't have to feel stressed out about it. I like to bring up Parvati, you know, because Parvati used to be Sati, and Sati was Shiva's first wife, and she ended up self-immolizing herself in order to prove her respect for Shiva. You know, her father had embarrassed Shiva at this gathering and not even invited him. And, you know, she proved her devotion to Shiva by making this huge sacrifice that, you know, you can't disrespect my partner. Seems really, you know, intense, right? But then she was reborn, you know, because that love was so immense and so beautiful and rich, and the devotion made her be reborn as Parvati. And, you know, we see that fertility is the cycle of death and rebirth, and that is what Parvati symbolizes. And it's this beautiful dance with your own love, you know, for something. This is reaching towards the sacral center, and the sacral center is passion, and it is where you feel the most satisfaction as a generator. That's literally the place of pleasure and satisfaction, the energy portal of that. So there's just so much juiciness to this particular gate here that we have. And it's really the possibility of grounding it. So we have a couple new transits that, you know, we haven't experienced in the last 84 years. You know, Uranus is now in Gemini, which is bringing so much more logic and communication. But there's a darkness and a lightness to it. So we're going to see both of those black and white aspects, you know, even in ourselves play out. But that in the individual age is going to bring about more conversations. There's going to be more intricacy and more meticulous details to specific laws or rules or orders. You know, there's going to be more bounds of technology, right? And literature and the way that people entertain and speak. There's going to be more fragments of how we are individually fractals, or, you know, anomalies. You know, we're not quite like on the same trajectory anymore. So there's going to be a lot more to experience and think about, as well as, you know, we have the Capricorn full moon today, and the Capricorn full moon is all about carving your own way and being an individual. You know, I know this through my own partner and through my own birth chart in astrology where I have Capricorn in Saturn and Uranus, or sorry, Uranus and Neptune, and it really brings about this self-discipline of, you know, well, this is going to be my way. I'm going to do it my way, and figuring out how to be that form, you know, and how to speak your truth, very personal, individual truth through this new Gemini era. Whew. So, hope you're still with me, but this is a part of the sensing circuit. So, you know, the seeds that we sow sometimes germinate from our own scarring. So, you know, that's what really a lesson, especially in relationships. Relationships give you heartbreak and scar you, you know, for the majority of us, right? And what are you going to learn from that last divorce? What are you going to learn from, you know, all of these like bouts and dealing with lawyers and the law, and like, how has that affected your family, and how will you really germinate the next era of you while not getting consumed by depression, while not getting consumed by the story itself, you know, because it still shapes you, and you have the opportunity to really become something out of this. And it takes time, you know, definitely. But what's going to hold you in this groundedness, this balance of your fuel, and how to use your fuel wisely, how to use your time wisely. I also want to bring up that this gate is on the cross of penetration. So this is the ability to penetrate, but like its polarity, gate 54. Gate 54 is the gate of the marrying maiden and ambition. So it is different because that ambition is really being seen as you are and being married into success. Like, oh, well, I want to be famous, so therefore I'm going to marry somebody famous. You know, it's the ambition to have a certain life, have a certain flavor of life. Whereas gate 53 and maturing is really about putting the work into it. So how are you going to master something to then become the form that you're proud of? You have to put in the fuel and the work, and there's no other way. And some of these mechanisms really work, you know, especially if you have this unconscious, you know, they work sometimes from the sidelines. You plant a seed, you know, it would be beneficial if you were to water the seed, you know, where you know it is planted. You know, Alok in one of these human design books that I have mentions that you can't plant a seed in Norway and then water it in Sweden. You know, it doesn't work that way. You won't really gain that sustenance. And the depth of the cycle. So as a gate 53, you know, it's still possible for you to finish the things that you start, but you might have a lot of new beginnings with things that you will never finish, and that is okay if that's what you have in transit, or in your chart definition naturally. And the spiral really loosens and tightens, right? So just because you don't go through the cycle, you know, the very first time you tried it and you put it down, doesn't mean that it won't be fulfilled later. Doesn't mean you can't pick it up and do it at a better suited divine time for you. You know, I, in my own instance, put down, you know, the life of music just because of my outside conditioning. You know, I was told that the music I produce is too sad, and I was feeling like, you know, I'm emotionally defined, so I was feeling my environment at that time when I was a teenager and what was going on for me. You know, my parents had separated, and like my mom would always have to listen to my music that therefore mirrored this depressing state. And she was like, you know, I don't want to hear this anymore. And, you know, that really like marked and scarred me, right, for many, many years. And for many years, I let that affect me, and I let that affect my life in music. You know, there was other factors, of course. I was separated from my tools, but I could have still made practice, you know, through this cycle and really burned through calcination and studied it regardless, right? Music theory is extremely complex. And now I deal with the cycle now where I'm 31 and just now really getting into the nitty-gritty of theory. So there's a lot of in between, you know, and even if you put down a cycle, it doesn't mean anything. You know, if you really truly are speaking from your authority, you know that the response is going to shine through. So, the questions of the week. What cycles are ending for you, and what did you learn? Even if it was painful, where is the silver lining? What cycles are beginning for you? Is your authority speaking at an instant? Do you need to be asked a certain way, or sit in your emotions before you can really say yes or no? So give yourself that space and that time to really simmer in it, especially if it's a big decision that'll change your life. That is what we are learning here, because the mind rides as a driver and it's supposed to be a passenger, right? And that's all that human design really teaches you and pinpoints, you know, these things like where are you going to be grounded, you know, where are you going to make your decisions from that is completely authentic and honest. Can you envision yourself after you've completed a cycle? Will you be more alive, more beautiful, more wise, or just have more finances to play with? How can this vision expand and hold you to the cycle of maturing? Knowing it will take dedication. So the visionary process is extremely potent for a lot of people. Not everyone is capable of doing that because their brain is different. There's no right or wrong. But the visionary process is what we learn in a lot of like manifesting cultures, but it is extremely powerful. Like vision boards are powerful, making a collage of what you wish to see, or even just letting your intuition make the collage, you know, and seeing what really unfolds and what holds you to your process. How can you be reborn from the old? Maybe someone told you you weren't good enough to keep going. And how will that transform into fuel for you to continue? For you to say, I did it my way. And regardless of what the external view looks like. Thank you for joining me this week with Gate 53. enjoy the last godhead Parvati for the next couple days, and I wish you all the best.